Today's featured speaker and NCRO member in good standing, Joe Ozdowy. Sorry about that, Joe. My name's Sibonary, I go through the same problem. So, Joe Ozdowy is one of a small group of Chrysler executives who has spent most of his 35 years of experience working outside of his home country. Born and raised in Detroit and its suburbs, Joe knew that he was going to be an automotive engineer since grade school. Joe started his career as a test and development engineer in Highland Park, and then held a variety of positions in Windsor, Argentina, Brazil, Delaware, Toronto, Sterling Heights, Auburn Hills, and Beijing, China. His last assignment was in Shanghai, China, where he held dual roles: Vice President of Asia Pacific Manufacturing and General Manager of our Jeep joint venture in China. Joe retired in 2019 and will share his global experience and thoughts with us this morning. Here with him today is his wife Lori, who has provided constant support through all his life. Please welcome our featured speaker today, Joe Ozdowy.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be a little rusty. I haven't done this in a couple of years. So, first thing I want to do is welcome everybody here. Joe Ozdowy, they just gave a good explanation of who I am. And I'm going to share my life story. As I went through putting this together after Joe Huber talked to me and asked me to come here, I started going through old photographs and had a pretty interesting life in Chrysler this whole time. And I found digital cameras, hard to find pictures. Digital camera time, easy. Cell phone camera times, millions and millions of pictures. So we'll move forward. So, like I said, born and raised in Detroit. My first experience with Chrysler was when I decided where I was going to work. And I had different job offers, trying to figure out where to work. And I decided that Chrysler's offer was 2 weeks sooner to start than any other offer. So I said, okay, this is great. I'm gonna go try Chrysler, and if it doesn't work out, I can take the GM job or one of these other jobs in 2 weeks and go work at these other places. But it actually turned out fantastic. We were just in post-bankruptcy, post-bailout was one of the first people being hired, and they gave me a ton of responsibility. Things that at GM or these other places, they would have given me a job like engineer for right-hand headrests. I had a ton of different jobs, so I never looked back, decided to stay my whole career. Started in Highland Park. I think everybody remembers Highland Park. How many of you started or worked in Highland Park here? Wow, almost everybody.
Look at us.
Yeah, exactly. So I started out in building 135. Anybody remember when that was the turbine building? Okay, so we got some old timers here. I remember the guys that I worked with would tell me about what happened in the turbines there. Close to building 128, the engineering hub. My experience was great. My boss gave me a job that had me coordinating with departments over the entire complex. So it was fantastic. I met people all over the complex, great people, and learned a lot. Also, I talked to one of the directors of engineering and I said, okay, I love working here and I want to be a chief engineer one day. How do I achieve that? And his recommendation was to follow in his footsteps. And he said, go to the plants for 2 or 3 years, learn how to build cars, come back and you'll stamp your ticket to be a chief engineer. So, went to HR, told them I wanted to go to manufacturing. They thought I was crazy. And my 2 or 3 years turned into 30-some years. By the time in Highland Park, spent time in building 201, plant 4, and I'm sure a lot of you guys were in those buildings also. What the model lineup looked when I started at Chrysler? Pretty K-centric. I remember working on the platform I believe was KEGHPJ. every car that we were working on was a K car. Yeah, we had some classics. We had the M-body New Yorker. We had the B-van, and most importantly, the T115 minivan, which really helped save the company. And it was really that guy there. You can see in the picture, Lee Iacocca, who I respect as best leader we had at the company. Merchione, pretty close though. Okay, one of my first activities, long trips working at Chrysler, was about 4 weeks after I got married, and it was a lap of America. That's where you go and test pilot cars and shake out the last problems with it. And you can see here, the North Dakota State Police weren't real impressed. They got CB calls of a caravan of Chryslers terrorizing the freeway at 120 miles an hour. So 2 or 4 cops pull us over. They were very respectful. They looked at the cars, talked to us, and they ended up only writing the lead driver, a ticket. So we got very lucky. You see in the lower left corner, I'm going to talk about me starting to learn that this is a real small world, and I learned that in the future. The guy who's got a little white ring around his head, or a halo, was an engineer from the transmission lab. Met him on this trip. Never saw him again after the trip until I was working in Newark, Delaware, 20-some years later. And I go to the parent-teacher conferences at my oldest son's high school and sit down with the teacher, look at him, look at his name, look at him, look at his name. Same guy. He left Chrysler a month after this trip, went into teaching, and he was my son's science teacher. So lesson, small world, you meet the same people everywhere. And that's gone on through my entire career. And one of the big benefits of the trip, in the right corner, I remember this well, was they paid us overtime for all the driving we did every day. So I made a ton of money. Lori and I took the money, gave each other a wedding gift, and we bought a $1,000 27-inch Sony Trinitron TV that we put in the house next to the cardboard furniture. Okay. My first international trip was to Mexico. They gave me a whole list of assignments, and I remember 3 of them distinctly that I'll tell you about. But you can see me in the lower right corner there, if you can see it. Sorry, it's a little low. I tried to look like Pancho Villa before I left. I did a pretty good job. I fit right in. But out of the problems we had, one of them was, the plant was complaining, Toluca was complaining radiator hoses. They couldn't install them on the car, okay? And I go to the plant, it's January or February, and I thought going to Mexico, it was gonna be warm. And I took a spring jacket, and I was freezing. I walk into the plant, everybody's wearing winter coats, parkas, face masks, gloves. The engineers take me to the area where the workers are working, and it's freezing there. There's ice still on the boxes. And I tell the guys, hey guys, this doesn't take rocket science. You don't need to be a PhD in engineering. Your problem here is your hoses are frozen. I said, all you gotta do is bring them in a day earlier, put a little heater on them, but don't bother me with it. Okay, so next place to visit was Lago Alberto, building the Ram Charger. Anybody remember that plant or been there? Okay, interesting plant. We had a lot of leaks on the Ram Charger trucks of the cooling system, and nobody could figure out what's wrong with it. So again, walk into the plant, and you got a seat. find out what a problem is. You need to see it. I think the Japanese call it Gimba and the 3Gs, and it really works. But again, see the operation, and the operator, instead of having a pistol grip air gun or a tool, is using a flat blade screwdriver, tighten up the radiator hoses. So I talked to the supervisor through my interpreter, and he goes, oh no, that's all we have. And I go, no, you gotta use some torque control, blah, blah, blah. Well, finally I ended up at the plant manager, and the plant manager explained to me, Joe, I understand it would be great if we could use air tools, but he says, you gotta remember, a pistol grip gun is small, and the workers put them in their pockets, and they take them out that door there, and you see those people? They buy them from them, and they make more money selling the guns than they do making a month here. But in the end, finally got him to at least work with me temporarily and come up with a gun for the operation. Third one I remember well was going into the Toluca engine plant where they built the 360s, because we were having a big problem with plugged radiators on the pickup trucks. And when we did the investigation, if anybody remembers the Whiz system, I know Joe probably remembers the Whiz system, we found out that 90% of the problems was with the 360. So, second time I've been in an engine plant, first time was in Mountain Road, go out to the line, look at the incoming blocks, and they're just completely full of coarse sand. And the engineers told me, don't worry, you know, we have a block washer, cleans it out. I says, okay, show me. They take me down to the block washer, brand new piece of equipment, high tech, high pressure, beautiful, everything's working well, except they're only cleaning the oil cavities. They didn't have anything pointed at the cooling cavities, so all that sand was still in the engine blocks. Okay, so that's, told the engineer, hey, you gotta fix that, you just need to adjust, you know, get the sand out. Okay, left, thought everything was good, but I learned my next lesson. I got back to Highland Park, wrote my trip report, sent it to my manager. They liked the trip report. 2 days later, sitting at my desk, I get a phone call from a secretary speaking Spanish. Okay? She asked if it was okay if I could talk to the plant manager from the Toluca engine plant. Well, he taught me a very powerful lesson. Never leave a plant without talking to the right person. He had gotten my report and Dick Dowd had gotten it, and he had gotten his butt reamed, but we had a nice conversation, and I learned the lesson. Talk to the boss. Never talk to who you don't know is in charge. And that stayed with me my whole life. You know, you always have to talk to the right people. January 2002, Graz was launching the minivan. We had just finished the minivan launch. I was working indirectly for Joe Huber, supporting the launches before then, and was all excited. I get to fly business class for the first time to Europe. This is going to be great. Problem was, one of the guys in my group kept giving my boss little advertisements from the Detroit News that said, Europe round trip, $399. Europe round trip, you know, $429. And he kept giving them to him every day and said, we need to save money. So my boss relented and says, okay, Joe, you're going to fly coach. I'm disappointed. Yeah. I get my ticket, and I open it up, and if anybody remembers the old Chrysler Pentastar, they always bought, at that time, full fare coach tickets. It was like $3,200 or $3,500 for a business class ticket. I'm sitting there in front of me looking at a $2,800 coach ticket, and obviously I was the last person, at least in our group, that flew coach. But getting to Graz, great plant. Joe helped set it up. Reminded me of high-tech Lago Alberto, a little bigger than Lago Alberto, about the same line speed, but great people there. Minivan was just launching. I think when I got there were about 4 vehicles on the line in the first 2 weeks I was there because it was going slow. And for the time I was there, Don Manville, all the other expats were all on vacation. But I did see Joe there once or twice in the office during that time. But just a great plant, yeah, huge advantage for the corporation to get us into Europe. As soon as I got back, I went to Windsor Assembly as the resident engineering manager. Windsor taught me how to build cars. Really started my manufacturing career. Did a ton of jobs there. Started as the resident engineering manager, quality manager, launch manager, ops manager, production manager. They even sent me to St. Louis for 6 months during the NS launch to be the acting quality manager at St. Louis. Great people, but the biggest thing I remember was operations reviews. Everybody was scared of operations reviews. I remember one operations review was all focused on cost, cost, cost. So being smart, electricity is a big cost. Canada's electrical rates are high. We turned off 90% of the lights in the aisleways, to show, we're saving money. Big boss gets out there, looks around, and says, we got a big capital budget this year. Why don't we give you a project to put in new lighting and paint the ceilings? Great. Oh, this is good. I learned a lesson. Okay, if you need something done, show the boss a problem. Another review, Bob Lutz came to the plant, took him to the paint shop, showed him that, and Joe would remember this, those tanks in pre-treat, old, rusty, showed him. He told Bob Eaton, our big boss gets a hold of it, boom, get approval, for a new pre-treat system, a couple $100 million. Just shows that, as soon as you show people stuff, people want to help. But one of the most interesting ops reviews was with Bob Eaton, and I was still young at the time. I didn't know protocol very well, and I had to give a couple of presentations in the conference room, then I had to do a floor tour for him. And all of his entourage during the time is referring to him, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman. And my mind's not picking it up. So I'm always going, Bob, Bob, Bob. Okay, but when we were done, Bob Eaton came, sought me out, shook my hand, as hard as he could, smiling, and was so thankful that I treated him like a normal person. And then I really understood it years later when me and our purchasing director in Argentina were walking through a plaza in Stuttgart, and I saw a couple walking, and I said, "That's Bob Eaton." He goes, "No." I says, "That's Bob Eaton." "No." So I walk towards the guy, and I go, "Bob?" And he smiles, and this big guy, who is a security guard, starts running in front of me. But Bob waved him off, and it was him, and we chatted about that good time where I called him Bob. He had gauged 20 years at the time, and I think it was 2 or 3 months later, was when he left the company for good. So 2007, when I started a lot of traveling, you can see, went in Argentina, Beijing, Delaware, Toronto, Sterling Heights, Auburn Hills, Brazil, Shanghai, and then finally retirement. So now I'm going to go through the story of how my wife, Lori, supported me, raised some great kids, a great experience for them, through this whole time. First stop was Cordoba, Argentina, and I love this picture that I took of our first house because it says a lot about Argentina. You've got rich, and you got poor. And you don't have much in between. The country's suffered hyperinflation, 3,000%, and you know, there's two groups of people. There's not much of a middle class here. You know, the guy on this cart with his donkey or horse, you know, his ambition in life at that time was to be able to add a cell phone, you know, to his cart. And by the time we left Argentina, we were starting to see the people on the carts, you know, using the cell phones. This is a great house. It was like a museum, but we left it less than a year. Wasn't safe, not in a good neighborhood, and we ended up moving into where we should have in the first place, you know, a gated community. When we picked the plant, it was actually Dennis Montone that picked the plant. We went into the automotive cluster in Argentina, and I don't know if anybody in here is old enough to remember the old Jeep plant in Cordoba, Argentina that closed in the 70s. Anybody? Okay, so the Renault plant was about 5 miles away from us, and that used to build Jeeps. We had the Fiat plant a couple miles east of us that had fires every day because the employees were constantly on strike. And the thing you did is you burned tires. Tires were cheap, tires gave you warmth, and they sent up huge black billows. So almost every day we had tire burnings there. And the Volkswagen transmission plant was just successful. It supplied transmissions for all of South America and even shipped them back to Europe. So it had a pretty good automotive hub in Cordoba. Then we were trying to develop the brand in South America, and the merger happened. Everybody remember the merger of equals? Remember those two guys? Yeah, we all know the stories. They were going to help. And first thing we did when they announced the mergers, our leadership team in Argentina and the Mercedes leadership team in Argentina had a dinner in Buenos Aires. And it was a very cold dinner, little conversation, but at least we met each other and knew who our counterparts and who the players were. Second meeting went much better. We actually all loosened up. They gave us a lot of wine, and the group we became pretty good friends and started working together after that meeting. But we had huge Mercedes presence and tiny Chrysler presence. Mercedes had been there for 50 years. We'd been there for 1.5 years. Mercedes in Sao Paulo, huge facilities building trucks. They had a brand new plant in Juiz de Fora, Brazil, launching the A-Class. I don't know if everybody remembers the A-Class, that car just a little bit bigger than the smart car. And they had a big plant in Gonzales Catan, what was just outside of Buenos Aires, building sprinters and bus chassis. And we at Chrysler had 2 plants. We had a small plant building Dakota trucks in Brazil, our plant building Cherokees and Grand Cherokees in Argentina. Problem, South America was losing a ton of money for Daimler Chrysler. So everybody went into, how are we going to fix this? And the merger had just happened, so there was restructuring money and write-off money available. So we and the partners did a lot of work to come to a decision that had already been decided by Mercedes-Benz. They needed to save money, they needed to show that we were doing something. Decision was made after just being in South America again for 3 or 4 years to close the Argentina plant and to close our plant in Brazil. Nobody wanted to touch the big money losers that Mercedes had because nobody could afford, billion-dollar write-offs that would have happened if we had to go the Mercedes way. The hope of the merger of equals before we closed we all thought that great things were going to happen, but we learned quickly that wasn't quite a merger of equals. Yeah. First thing that happened in the meetings, we said, we're new in the country, we need distribution. You know, how can we leverage Mercedes' presence here, blah, 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 blah. Team had tons of good ideas of how to use the back room, how to use the connections in the dealer network and everything. Everything went up to Stuttgart, came back from the head of the Mercedes brands, words that hurt me and I'll never forget. And those words were, we will never allow the Pentastar to tarnish the image of the three-pointed star. And it hurt, but that was the end of the synergies. So we didn't have much help there. We also learned a little bit more when everybody had to look at how to merge in country. You know? What's the best way to merge in country? Mercedes was established, Chrysler was new. Chrysler, we had a bunch of tax benefits and we had a lot of incentives the government had given us. Sent the report to Stuttgart that said, okay, if Chrysler in Argentina absorbs Mercedes, we're going to save this many tens of millions of dollars every year. Report came back, sorry, this was an absorption. Daimler absorbed Chrysler, you do the same in Argentina. New, wasn't a merger of equals. And we already talked about, you know, how the millions and billions differences closed us down in Argentina. So my first experience with the Daimler guys was not filled with a lot of hope. You know, now I started my reputation of being the closer. Closed the plants in Argentina, and what I did, put all the Grand Cherokee tooling into sea containers and moved them to China. Life in Argentina, late, weddings lasting till 6 in the morning, people going to gas stations, coming back later, continuing to party. Dinners were at 11. Great outside activities. You know, Jeep brand strong. Remember one trip, we were going up the mountain, guys were afraid, the road was too rough, and a 40-year-old Renault CV4 comes whizzing past us at 20 miles an hour, makes it up to 2,800 meters. Guy in front was embarrassed and we followed the Renault. Went to a rodeo up in Salta where it's hot, 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 hot. It was like 105 degrees that day. We drove 5 hours. And we get there at noon, at 12 o'clock. I'm sorry, it's when it was supposed to be. And the stadium's trashed. Beer bottles, wine bottles, everything, garbage everywhere. And we found out that 12 o'clock in Salta is 12 midnight, because only an idiot would have a rodeo under the sun when it's 105 degrees outside. Hey, moved to Beijing. You can see a lot of people you probably know in that picture. Started there with building, when I arrived, we were building Jeep Cherokees, a BJ 2020, which was a gift from the Russians, and a civilian model. We quickly launched the Grand Cherokee, Mitsubishi Pajero, Mitsubishi Outlander, and a new military vehicle for the Jeep. You know, but we were still losing money. A lot of interesting guests would come to Beijing. I don't know if anybody recognizes Joseph Kabila from the Democratic People's Republic of Congo. You know, the president of China invited him there to learn how to build cars. He wanted to build cars in China. Interesting guy, spoke perfect English, educated in England, spoke French. Thing that impressed me most were his bodyguards, who you can see in the back, but it doesn't show, but all of his bodyguards are about 6 inches taller than me. Yeah, it was funny for me because when I got home and read about him, I realized that he's the guy who allegedly had his father killed to take over the job. This was interesting. The Daimler guys were trying to help us save the company, and they brought some guys from GAZ, the Russian auto company that wanted to look at opportunities for Jeeps. So their engineers came, and this fella here came. They had a great time looking at our car because they built the same car in Russia still, and had a lot of fun. Interesting meeting, didn't think much about it, got home, told the family and my 12-year-old, that Oleg Deripaska, was at the plant today. And my son goes, who? And I tell him the name again, and he goes, Dad, that's the 5th richest man in the world. And I go, no, this guy builds old Jeeps. So I look on the internet, and I find out, this guy's the 5th richest guy in the world, and I laughed, because lunchtime came, and didn't know what to do at lunch. Nobody made any preparations, so we walked across the street, like that little shop there you see, walked up a stairway, got into an old restaurant. There were 7 of us, and the whole meal was less than $20 US, paid for it out of my own pocket because, submitting an expense report at the joint venture, take years. I never get the money back. But interesting guy. I just read he was looking to buy a Hummer recently, and he did some other things. Here's Tom Lasorda. After an ops review, he was a board member. The interesting thing was here, the JV communicated with his secretary and said he can only eat special things. So we went to the restaurant on the Great Wall after doing some plant benchmarking visits in the area, and everybody came out to serve the dinner, the owner, the manager, the whole staff. They opened up this huge tray and presented the first lobster dinner ever eaten on the Great Wall. And it was all miscommunication. Tom laughed because the secretary just said, there's just a few things he couldn't eat, but lost in translation said he had to have lobster. Okay. The old BJC plant, we had to move, and the interesting thing was we were right by the central business district, and part of the deal before you can sell the land, because the government owns all the land, they have 40 to 99-year leases on it, that you have to get an approved plan for the future of the land before you can sell it. So you can see, this is what we propose to the government as the future use of our old factory. And we got that approved. We negotiated forever between the government and Dieter Zetsche on how much money they were going to give us for this plant to move. I figured it was worth between $500 million and $1 billion. We got way less, but we did get enough money to move. And there's the proof. We did tear it down. And the smartest thing we did is my guys convinced me to hire the mayor's nephew to do the demolition. We had problems, boom, all resolved immediately. And I really learned how important Guanxi, or connections, was in China. So, tore down my second plant, clothes are doing well. Okay, a little bit about our start of living in China, and I just pulled these pictures out because I was thinking about COVID, SARS. No question for me, the wet markets in China 20 years ago were a disaster. You had every type of animal, birds, snakes, reptiles, dogs, cats, all in the wet markets, all being butchered together. It was a mess, but I will say it's cleaned up a lot since then, but it's just infestation for SARS, COVID, etc. Worst thing about Beijing, pollution. Weekends were fun. These times were rough. Doctors said it was like 2 packs a day. Took me 5 years to get my lung capacity back. Yeah. You wonder how did they win the Olympics? When the Olympic team came, it was great. They brought in 1 million people. They brought paint. Anything that should be green that was brown, they painted green. They brought in tens of thousands of trees, put them on all the roadways. They seeded the clouds for 2 weeks, closed all the factories, and the city was beautiful. And after being there for a couple of years, it was the first time I realized that you could see mountains around Beijing, because we could see them. But that's how they got the Olympics. I mean, it goes to, with perseverance, resources, you can get anything done. Interesting party. Guys wanted wine for a party I had in my house. Bottom of the line was wine meant Western liquor. And had a good party, even though the guys, when I had them mix their own drinks, were mixing up gin with Kahlua and Coca-Cola. And they're all mixing everything up, and I had to stop the party and have my translator explain and rearrange the liquor and say, okay, these are things that can go together, and you can drink them this way. Lori and I took the opportunity when we were in Beijing to do something for ourselves. We both got MBAs there. Next thing we did is we built a new plant for both Daimler and us outside of the city. Most embarrassing time in my life was we picked the land with Mercedes, and we're working on everything. And after we had started the process, doing more due diligence, but after we reported it, we found that there was an old gravel pit full of water on the land. And it was terrible. At CTC, everybody nicknamed it Lake Ozdowy. My guys that I gave the assignment to, I said, why didn't you find this, guys? This is terrible. And their attitude was, Mercedes is going to make all the decisions anyway. Doesn't matter. Wanted to fire them all. But I was an American, couldn't do a thing. But turned out okay. Quickly changed the land, negotiated, got it done, built the plant, launched the Chrysler 300, put the NQZ there. After I left, we launched the J-body. But then you can see in the picture there, you see the part in red. That's the part that we built when I was there. But today, Mercedes, after the divorce, took over the plant. They've expanded it greatly, and they're doing almost 1 million cars a year out of that plant. So it's been a big success story for them. Okay, move on from there to Newark, Delaware, and I got these two guys' pictures here. I'm going to try to talk quick. Tom Carper, Senator, Joe Biden, Senator. Carper, for the day I got there, boom, anxious to help the joint venture, help Chrysler. But then the plant was announced to close, and that guy on the left had a couple meetings with him, and Lori and I will never forget one charity event we were at where Mr. Biden gave me clear direction on exactly what I needed to tell my boss about how he thought of things. Very interesting. But Joe Biden was consistent. Closed the plant there. Unfortunately, sold it to the university. Boom, plant closed. Did a great job, 3. Quickly went to Toronto. Guys in Toronto were scared to death. Here comes the closer. Okay, the short time I was there at Brampton wasn't too exciting. It was just save money, save money, save money. We were nearing bankruptcy. But then something great happened. May 2009, I think, or sometime about that. They announced we're going to close the Sterling Heights assembly plant. Boom! Move the closer to Sterling Heights. Was there, and a beautiful thing happened. FCA came over. I wasn't able to close the Sterling Heights plant because that guy, Sergio Marchione, Olivia Francois, they came up with this brilliant idea of calling the old, the Cirrus, Chrysler 200. They got M&M to do a commercial, and the plant's sales quadrupled, and I moved on and said goodbye to being the closer. Spent some time running CTC and building utilities. Spent time in Russia, looking for a new plant there before the Russian economy collapsed. This was a plant right on the river. On the other side of the river were $100 million yachts. Reminded me of everything I'd just gone through in Beijing, of having a plant in the central business district. The Fiat guys pushed us to put a plant in there. Luckily, the economy collapsed in Russia, and we fell out of that. Next big assignment was in Pernambuco, Brazil. Built a mega plant there in the middle of cornfields. 6 million or 7 million square feet under roof, largest civil project in the world. Beautiful thing about this was the negotiated incentives that Fiat had negotiated to get a huge refund on the VAT tax. So this plant, hugely profitable, started with launching the Jeep Renegade, Compass. We also had to build a hospital there for the people as part of it. We built test tracks, built a little proving grounds, actually a pretty big proving grounds to do the certification of vehicles. You know, since it was a big event and so profitable, you know, we had the president, we had the chairman of the board, we had Marchione there, and then the guy who became a good friend of mine, Stefan Ketter, the head of FCA's global manufacturing, you know, who really helped me at this time in my life really understand what manufacturing was like. Living in Joa Pessoa was nice. I got a chance on the Chrysler's dime to live right on the ocean and learned it's great, but it's not something I wanted to do, or Lori wanted to do the rest of our life. But you can see there, where we lived was the easternmost point of the Americas, and if you see that point on the far top left, that's only 2,000 miles from Africa and directly due south of the middle of the equator. Now, sun got up same time every morning because we're only 6 degrees from the equator. Everything there happened at night because it was too hot during the day. Take us to the next stop, Shanghai. Yeah, it had been 10, 12 years since we were there. Some things changed, some things not. City's super modern, but still a lot of the old. But if you go there within the next few years, there's not going to be any old. That city is moving fast. At the joint venture, had a great lineup, 2 Fiats. Car built just for the China market, Jeep Grand Commander, 7-passenger Jeep. And then we had the Jeep Cherokee, the Compass, and the Renegade. Seems like a great lineup. I just put this one here because when I saw the pictures, it reminded me of my name. As you've noticed, by American standards, I'm slightly taller than average. By Chinese standards, every picture I towered over the folks, they called me Dada Wei, Big Joe. Plant there was good plant. My life started at 5 in the morning on Sunday mornings, an airplane trip to get me to Changsha by 8:45 in the morning, and that conference room, that room at the hotel is where we held meetings every night, you know, to continue to run the joint venture. Joint venture was burning cash. It was a stressful job. We also built another plant in Guangzhou, and that plant opened a few years ago, was building Renegades and Compasses, like I said, and with the new absorption or merger, whatever it is, with Stellantis, that plant's already been sold and turned back over to our joint venture partner. The problem in China, and I wish I knew the answers, is how do you sell Jeeps in China? I've been there twice. We haven't figured it out. This time you can see the sales for us peaked at 200,000. This year in the first 6 months, down to 12,000. So 90% drop in 4 years. You can see not much different from our Peugeot. They peaked, it looks like 450,000, and they've dropped 95%. I read an article from Tavares, who's now consolidated everything, saying, well, not sure what to do in China, but it looks like the Chinese like German cars, you know, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, so they may try Opel. And I wish them a ton of luck because, you know, times I've been there, we haven't figured out how to make China successful. About the last thing I've got is just China on the whole. There we've got Xi Jinping, the president for life. I don't want to call him emperor, but he's pretty much replaced Mao as the most important person in Chinese history. And it really hit me one day when I walked into my hotel room at the West Inn in Guangzhou. And I'm used to, in the US, you go into a hotel and in the drawer is Gideon's Bible. And I walk into this hotel and in the middle of the bed is Xi Jinping's book, The Thoughts of Xi Jinping. And he's now replaced Mao's Red Book with this. He's running the country. Just to talk about China for a minute, it's an autocracy. He's able to make whatever decisions he wants. His first thought is China. The Communist Party's first thought is China. And I think everybody knows their ambition is to do whatever it takes to keep expanding and be in control. And they're patient. They're not worried that it's going to happen in a year, it's going to happen in one term or 2 terms, like our Congress people. They're thinking, if I can't do it now, I'll do it for my children or my children's children. So keep watching them. I don't like what they do, but I do respect it because they're doing things pretty right. Last thing, now into retirement. Smartest book I ever read was this, How to Retire Happy, Wild, and Free. Cleared my head completely. This book told me before I retired, you retire the year, month, day, minute, second, where you have enough money that you don't have to work anymore. And the second thing it said, if you're decent at your job, your company is going to come and they're going to offer you great things to stay. And it said, if they do that to you, remember what we told you. Don't listen to that, retire. So I gave them a year's notice that I was retiring, exactly like the book said happened. Retired, never looked back. I'm healthier, lost weight, feel great. Life is good. Lori and I spend our summers now, Lake Orion. Our winters in the Villages, Florida. Lake Orion's called, I think, Where Living is a Vacation, and the Villages is living the dream. It's like Disney World. It's a great life down there. Lori and I enjoy it a bunch. So that's my life story in a nutshell. I know I went quite a bit over, so we only got about 10 minutes for questions, but myself or Lori are happy to answer anything you guys want. Anybody have anything? Okay. What's next?
Is this on? Oh, there we go. Okay. Any questions?
I just have one.
Okay, there we go.
How did you remember all that stuff?
Thank you, Bob. I went through all of our old pictures, and it was just neat. I remembered a ton as I went through the photographs. It was enlightening, and myself, Lori, and Joe Huber were talking here that, this is the type of thing, this is my life at Chrysler that I put into a little book here for a presentation. I'm probably going to change it, add some things that we didn't have time for here. Probably going to make a book out of it, put on the coffee table as a remembrance of my 35 years at Chrysler. But Bob, it was mostly the pictures. It's cool to have them.
Okay, we have one over here, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, we've heard a lot about intellectual property and issues with China, taking intellectual property. What's been your experience with that?
Well, my first experience with it was at the 2002 Beijing Auto Show. I got called down to the auto show because our partner, Beijing Automotive Industries Group, had a vehicle on display that they were selling and launching that looked suspiciously like our Jeep. So they called me down as the expert to look at it. And I looked at it and I said, yep, that's our doors. Yep, that's our seats. Yep, that's our instrument panel. Yep, that's our axles. Yep. And our joint venture partner was happy with, was perfectly acceptable with it, reported it up the Daimler food chain. A lot of ranting. Nothing happened. And that happened a couple times. And since they did such a good job with the Jeep, when we moved out, I actually outsourced our Jeep production to that same plant for the old Cherokee. because they were doing such a good job and they already had the tooling for it. But on the big picture, China has the best laws in the world, but they don't enforce them, or they enforce selectively. Intellectual property rights are constantly stolen, and unless the government at the highest level has put pressure on that particular theft, it happens every day. And I don't see it changing. Except in the extreme cases where it's in their political best interest not to steal them.
Right here, Joe.
Very simple question, maybe not easy answer. How did you stay personally connected with family back in America?
Did you see that picture of the house in Lake Orion? That was a cottage that my dad and I bought together 31 years ago. And that became us and our children's home away from home. For 2 weeks every year, we came back to that cottage, which we're now going to keep forever and give to the kids or grandkids, whatever happens in the future. And we were able to reconnect with family who's all in the Detroit area. So that little cottage was what brought us together. And that's why we renovated it from a little cottage to something pretty nice now.
Any other questions? Joe, Jay, hold on 1 second.
All those years, do you have any favorite bosses or bosses you weren't particularly proud of?
Maybe this is when you turn the webinar off?
Well, there was one of the bosses who I thought was the best was a recent CEO, but he was also a guy that scared the heck out of me. When I was putting this presentation together, I was remembering those long nights putting together presentations that I knew were going to be wrong for our recently deceased FCA CEO, and never knew what was going to set him off, but been yelled at many times from him. But I did respected him completely, and loved the guy. But boy, he sure knew how to give a beating. Most of the bosses I had, great people I worked with at Windsor. They treated me like family. Argentina, they treated me like family. Newark was like family. Brampton and Sterling Heights was so short, didn't have time. But the chairman of Beijing Automotive Industry Group, I used to go out to him once a quarter, take him to dinner. He made $800 a month as a state-owned enterprise employee and the chairman of a multi-billion-dollar company. So it was great for him. I could spend $50 on him for a big dinner, and we could get things done at a dinner that would take months through meetings. So all bosses were good. Some were just a little bit harder on you than others, and I think we all know which one was the hardest.
Okay, any questions? Any more questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Joe, for a great presentation. Just brings us all back, I think. So thank you for that. And thank you, everyone, for coming. If you could stick around for the Medicare enrollment counseling, please do. If not, be safe driving home and just take care. Then we'll see you at our next breakfast meeting, hopefully in January. Bye-bye.